Hi, I'm James and I'm a registered sport nutritionist, ultrarunner and lover of all things fitness. But right back when I started my health and fitness journey and nutrition journey, I remember just plodding my way around my first half marathon, feeling pretty low in energy, completing it but thinking, God, how on earth do people turn around and run that same distance back? Right through to a point now where I'm able to sprint through the finish lines of marathons, high rocks events, ultra marathons and Ironman triathlons. But the most important thing is that I now have complete confidence in my sport nutrition, in my food choices. And in this video, I'm going to teach you the exact same thing. How to have complete confidence that your nutrition will allow you to smash your goals. So the problem nowadays is that everyone has a platform to give nutrition advice. But sadly, not everyone has the qualifications to do so. So you're going to get PT, Joe Blogs, Jane Doe telling people what to eat based on what has worked for them, or maybe a handful of their clients. But we always forget that there's actually a survivorship bias. So what happens to the people that don't get the results? Well, I'll tell you, they come to me and they're feeling pretty frustrated because they've tried so many different things in the past and it hasn't worked for them. And this frustration means that they're ready for a different approach. They're ready for something which is focusing on the long-term results. They want something that's a bit more bespoke and tailored to them, all the while increasing their knowledge, because that's what's going to enable the long-term behavior change. Now, you may resonate with these people because maybe you have tried to manipulate your diet in the past with some or limited success, and it feels like you're on this cycle too. So what you need to do to actually have that long-term success is to really deeply understand the core principles of sport nutrition, of which I'm going to share with you in this video, and then be able to apply them to your specific needs and your goals, and to be able to do that consistently to be able to increase your performance and your long-term health. And let's face it, your mood. So this video is for you if you are looking to deepen your knowledge of sport nutrition so that you can have complete confidence with your food choices. This video is for you if you want to have healthy long-term habits without a reliance on calorie counting or restrictive dieting. This video is for you if you want consistent high energy levels throughout the whole day. Yes, I'm going to teach you all of that. This video is not for you, however, if you're looking for the next quick fix or a fad diet or maybe just some macronutrient targets to follow blindly. Now, without wanting to toot my own horn too much, I think this really could be the most valuable video you watch all year. Just because I'm literally going to show you everything, starting from leveling up your energy levels. I'm going to walk you through the secret formula that's going to enable you to enjoy consistent, enduring high energy levels, both in training and in life outside of training. So that you can do a hard session, maybe an interval session, and then come back and still be able to run around and have fun with the kids. Or maybe you can do a hard session, you have a long day at work, and instead of getting back feeling physically and mentally drained, you've actually got the energy to enjoy your downtime. I'm going to show you how to bounce back from training faster, get out of that plateau, and actually start making progress again. And what's just fascinating about this process that I'm going to teach you is that it will make you want to eat more nutritious food and reduce your desire for things like chocolate and crisps without you even noticing it. At the end of this video, I'm going to give you a clear action plan, some steps to take to improve your performance and your health. And yes, this stuff works, both in the short term and in the long term, but not just for me, for people like Mark, James, Sam, and Talene. Check it out.
My body composition is definitely changed. People have commented, quite a few people have commented, even my wife, who, obviously sees me every day. She's like, yeah, you're definitely much smaller in the midsection.
And even though I've eaten more, because I was tracking my weight, I've lost a kilo. So I'm like, this is brilliant. Like, I'm eating more food, I'm training harder, and I'm feeling better, and I've lost some weight.
How did I do that? But I just felt like smashed it. I was cruising at 240 watts. I was like, my legs feel great. I'm halfway through. I've done my 2 10-minute blocks in. So yeah, I just felt superhuman.
And I totally smashed it. So the poor guy who has to do all the sit-ups with me, he's like staggering away. I'm going, hook your feet in, it's fine. off we go. And in fact, so much that after the 45 minutes, I went off and did 20 minutes heavy on the weights.
Okay, big words so far, James, no pressure. And if I were you, I would probably be thinking this all sounds too good to be true. So without further ado, let me dive in and talk you through this process. Okay, so I have my, oh God, absolutely massive whiteboard here. Let's get this set up. I'm going to start talking you through it. So I think in the fitness world, there's a bit of an obsession with protein at the moment. Brands have cottoned onto this, and there's protein in all of our food, and we're very aware that we need to be eating high protein. Some of us can achieve this, some of us don't, but we're missing the elephant in the room when it comes to energy, which is carbohydrate. I think carbohydrate tends to get a very much of a bad rep. Sugar is maybe not understood as well as it could be. So for the first little bit of this, we're going to dive deep into carbohydrate, and my intention is to help you understand it on a much deeper level, how carbohydrate affects your fueling, and I want you to know the duration and the intensity of your training, of your running, of your exercise impacts your petrol tank. So I want to try and explain a little bit more about what this petrol tank is. So we're going to start that now. Let's say we have a graph here. We have calories, if I can spell it, calories per hour on the side here. Maybe we have 1,500 calories, we have 1,000 calories, 500 calories, 0 calories. Imagine now that you are being put on a treadmill, and you're going to have to run on that treadmill, and it's going to, every minute or so, maybe every 2 minutes, it's going to get a little bit faster, and the incline's going to go up. So your heart rate at the start might be about 80 beats per minute. It's just getting into it. Okay, we're jogging along, we're just a little bit over resting. But by the time you finish, where you physically can't keep running anymore, you're at your absolute max, because this is a VO2 max test. You're at probably 220 minus your age. So that might be around, well, for me, that's about 190, 185, something like that. Mine actually totaled out at around 180 beats per minute here. So we're going to have 100, 160, 140, 120. As the intensity increases, as does your heart rate. That makes sense. Like when you work harder, you can feel your heart racing more. As the intensity increases, so does the amount of calories that you expend. So actually what's going to happen during this run is you're going to have calories are going to go up a little bit like that, fairly linearly. Harder you work, the harder your heart rate, the more calories you're burning. That makes sense. But what fuels this? Now, if you've ever done a VO2 max test, or you've had a friend that's done one and spoken about it a little bit, they might talk about their carbohydrate and fat flexibility. It's called metabolic flexibility. So I'm going to do, let's do fat here. Fat is blue. Probably don't need to write it because the pen's blue. And we're going to do carbs green. So at rest, what is providing the vast majority of your fuel is going to come from fat. So actually here, you're probably using pretty much all fat. Now that will stay true up until, and again, it'll be a little bit dependent on who you are and your training background. So for example, and this is the key bit, because this might actually influence your fueling and refueling, because not everyone is the same here. Everyone's going to have a slightly different graph. So for example, maybe you went and did, or you have a history of doing some time restricted eating, or you've experimented with fasting. That's going to probably mean you're relatively good at metabolizing fat at increasing intensities. Or maybe you have a dog and you go for 2, 3, 4 hour long dog walks and you don't fuel with that. So actually you're in essence doing a lot of long, slow training. So what that is doing is it's teaching your body to have to use fat as fuel. So that will mean you're going to burn more fat here before you start burning carbohydrate. Alternatively, if you have you haven't have a history of doing any fasting, and you like carbohydrate, you eat a fair amount of carbohydrate in most of your meals, and you've never done much in the way of low, slow, long training, maybe most of your training, or you're just getting into it, has been quite high intensity because maybe you're time poor and you're just getting it in, getting it done, you might be much more of a carb burner. So your amount of fat might be relatively low here, and the amount of carbs is going to come up quicker. So let's take an average person. I'll explain the difference of those two in a second. But let's take an average person. We're going to have fat providing most of the intensity through here, but it's then going to start to come down. Okay, so we get this sort of line like this. The rest of the energy here is going to come from carbohydrate. So we see here we're using a blend of fat and carbohydrate. So our carbohydrate is coming from our muscle glycogen and liver glycogen, and our fat is coming from our subcutaneous fat, as well as intramuscular and stuff that's floating in our veins. As we get to here, we might actually be burning completely carbohydrate. So our line for carbohydrate is going to be high here, and then it's going to start to come down like that, and we get this sort of crossover line. The impact of this, or hopefully now just having this visual, means, right, I can tell that when I'm training, and we can maybe put this as this is like a 9 out of 10. Because this is holding a high heart rate. This is your CrossFit, this is your gym session, this is your interval runs. This is like your 5 out of 10. This is your sort of 3 out of 10. This is your just more than resting. So this is like yoga, 1 out of 10. Maybe not all, I know not all yoga is like that, but yin yoga maybe. So you know here that that's not going to require you to refuel your petrol tank with carbohydrate, because actually you haven't really been using much carbohydrate. But as the intensity comes up, maybe you're starting to do hard runs at a 7, 8 out of 10, you are taking a big chunk out of your petrol tank, because the majority of what's fueling the calories burnt there is carbohydrate. So this next one is speed of muscle glycogen. I've actually made a note here to make sure I get the title of the research that this is based off right. This is going to be by Saltine and Carlson, 1971, so it's almost over 50 years old, this research. Muscle glycogen utilization during exercise of different intensities. This is what I'm going to teach you. So we've got our graph again. Now, this time I want to explain that this is going to be your petrol tank. So your petrol tank, I'm talking here just about your carbohydrate petrol tank. So remember, as we were getting with that old graph, the higher intensities, we're using a lot of carbohydrate. This is now going to put a little bit more detail on that. So here I want to put this at 20. So instead of it being 0 at the bottom, because you're never really going to fully deplete muscle glycogen, your body will stop you doing that. 80, 60, 40. Okay, so imagine that's like your petrol tank. Now along here, I'm going to put time. So we've got 0 minutes, we've got 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, 120 minutes. What this graph is about is going to be trying to show you how the intensity and the duration of the exercise that you're doing is how quickly it's going to deplete your petrol tank. So if we start here at a full petrol tank, so this is assuming we've had, this is a Monday, and on Sunday you've had a nice big roast, loads of potatoes, and you had lunch, you had rice for lunch, so there's lots of carbohydrate, and it was a rest day, so you're fully topped up here. Now, if you were to exercise at an intensity of, let's say, 30% of your VO2 max, so about a 3 out of 10, so maybe it's a walk, or just above a walk, it's like a very fast walk, hike. We're gonna be about like this, okay? So 30% VO2 max, so we're calling this our 3 out of 10. So what you can see, because now you know from that last graph, because the intensity is not very high, your heart rate was probably, a little bit above resting, but we're nowhere near up in the sort of 140s, 150s. We're not dipping into that petrol tank very much, because we're only at a 3 out of 10. If, however, we go harder than that, maybe we're at 60% of our VO2 max. 60% VO2 max, and call that a 6 out of 10. That line now is going to be more like this, okay? Because we've shifted where we were on that graph before, and we're now dipping into our petrol tank a little bit more. Now this one is interesting because it kind of explains what happens when people hit the wall in a marathon. So people often hit the wall when they don't fuel properly during a marathon or at all, because they're probably working about this intensity, right? They're maybe conversational pace or just above. They're working hard, but they're not all out because they've got to run a marathon. They're at this 6 out of 10. If you're not putting any carbohydrate in during this, and we extend this, so we get to a point here where we're 180 minutes or 3 hours or 3.5 hours, by the time they're 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through their marathon, boof, they are depleted of muscle glycogen, which is their fuel for intensity, holding this. So they get here, they hit the wall. This is going to be my lovely wall. They hit that wall because they then don't have the fuel to provide the intensity to hold that 6 out of 10. Boom. Hopefully we get a bit of a light bulb there. Keep going with this. By the time we are at 75% VO2 max, so 7.5 out of 10, we have energy in our muscle glycogen tank for about 90 minutes of work, of hard work, so 7.5 out of 10. As we get to 90%, so as we start really pushing this, so 90% VO2 max, 9 out of 10. Well, obviously we can't really hold a 9 out of 10 for a huge amount of time, so it's not going to give you the opportunity to fully deplete, but you can suddenly see how quickly we start reducing our muscle glycogen stores. If we push up past VO2 max, so we go to 120% of VO2 max, so this is our 10 out of 10, then it's going to be something like that, okay? So it might be about sort of 10, 15, maybe it's a little bit more like that. 10, 15 minutes, and we're pretty much done. The implication of this is I want you to understand how your different training, so be it a long, slow run, a cruise sort of aerobic run, zone 2, or intervals, threshold, or maybe you're going to a class and you're doing high intensity workout. If you're working at this high intensity, maybe the class is like a 45-minute or an hour long class, but there's a period of time in it where it's like 15 minutes of all out, well, actually suddenly you're taking a massive chunk out of that petrol tank. That then informs how much carbohydrate you need to put back in. Similarly, if you're doing long, slow runs at the weekend and you're getting up to sort of an hour, 90 minutes, and you're at this sort of 7.5 out of 10, you can't quite hold a conversational pace anymore, we're taking a huge amount of carbohydrate out of our petrol tank. So then we know we need to start putting some back in if we're gonna feel good for the rest of the day, have energy for the rest of the day, and actually maybe even if we want to train again tomorrow. What I really want to explain is the effect of eating carbohydrate on our petrol tank. And I hope we get a few light bulb moments here, because this often helps people understand why they maybe get midway through the week and their energy levels are on the floor. So this bit of research, you can read up on this if you want, and I've got the name right. So this next bit of research is from Murray and Rosenblum, 2018. It's called Fundamentals of Glycogen Metabolism for Coaches and Athletes. We've got our same line. So we've got our 100%, we've got our 20%, we've got 80, 60, 40. Should have just left that on there. This time we're going to have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, maybe we've had that big carbohydrate eating day on Sunday, we've gone out somewhere, we've had a pub lunch, there's been dessert, we're fully topped up on the Sunday, so we're coming into Monday here with a fullish petrol tank. But on Monday, maybe it's Monday morning, we train. We go out and we're starting the week, we've got a hard run. It's maybe a 45-minute to an hour session, and based on the information on our last graph, if you're pushing maybe a 7.5 out of 10, we can take a decent chunk out of our petrol tank here, just in that morning session. Then, if that's say like a 7 till 8, and then you're going off to work, you've then got the rest of the day, if you're not going to train again, to refuel. So we're going to have breakfast, maybe we have lunch, and then let's say for dinner we're trying to be healthy, we're going like fish or a meat element, and we've just got a big plate of veggies, and we don't have as much carbohydrate in that evening meal, so we look something like this. We then lose a little bit while we sleep from our liver glycogen, and then Tuesday morning we've got another session. Not quite as intense, but we're still going to take a big chunk out of our petrol tank on Tuesday. We've then got breakfast, we've got lunch and dinner. So we've done a pretty good job refueling that because there's carbohydrate in each of those. Wednesday, another really intense session. It might not be a run this time, maybe you've gone to a class and it's hard. It's an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. So we've taken another big chunk out of that petrol tank. Hopefully we've refueled, we've had some carbohydrate, but maybe we don't have much for lunch and then we have some for dinner. Gets to Thursday, and this is one where, okay, it's another intense run, but by this stage, we're not going to be going in with a full petrol tank. We're sort of half full petrol tank. So actually this run now is going to feel pretty terrible. You're not going to be performing as well as you did here because these last few days, you simply haven't had enough carbohydrate to top up your tank. That might then explain why sometimes we get through the week, especially if you eat more on the weekends in terms of carbohydrate, we get some way through the week and we just like struggling to perform in these sessions. So Friday, let's say Friday we have a rest day. So we have some meals here to replenish. Because we don't dip down on Friday, we've come back up. Saturday we feel good and we do our long run and it looks like that. Hopefully that kind of explains a little bit about the depletion and then the repletion. But there's a little bit more detail that we need to put on to understand this replenishment. So I'm going to add a new line here. Imagine, well, a way of working this out is if you look at carbohydrate best practice for carbohydrate loading or sport nutrition guidelines as per the ACSM, it's going to be, use a black pen, it's going to be 8 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. It's all done in body weight because then it's going to be specific to any athlete, whatever athlete that is, it's specific to their body weight. So this will be specific to your body weight. So here, I personally like to use the lower number when I do carbohydrate loads with clients because, to be honest, if you're eating that amount, it's a huge amount of food. It's very difficult to eat that amount without feeling overly full and bloated. And actually the extra benefit you have from getting that much, you super compensate, but then you end up reducing your muscle glycogen quicker. So up in around 8 grams is about right. So let's say we know to fully load up, people are recommending, the researchers are recommending having about 8 grams to fully load us. So let's say we split this into 8. We then know that, okay, taking a chunk out of our petrol tank, suddenly we can have, this is all 1 gram per kilogram body weight. We can start to know how much carbohydrate we need to replace based on the intensity of that exercise. So from going to here, to get back up to where we want to be, instead of having 2 or maybe 3 grams per kilogram over the day, we want to have maybe 4 grams per kilogram body weight over the day. Instead of having a meal and then not enough carbohydrate here, we need to be having, if we've dropped down this low, we need to be more aggressive with our carbohydrate intake and have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 grams per kilogram body weight. The carbohydrate load works because you're not necessarily going in from a depletion stage. So you're actually then super compensating, getting really full so that you've got a full petrol tank going into your race. This is great. This is the theory, James. How do we actually action something off the back of it? So this is where we start to apply things. So 6 a.m. Let's do 12. Let's do 9:30. Let's go sort of 3, 4:30, 3:30, 7, maybe 10 o'clock down here. You're going to bed. So now, how I like to coach this and what helps get those light bulb moments is we look at when you train across the week. So I'm going to put those in blue. So Monday morning, maybe you get out, you normally do a fasted run. I'm not going to dive into fasted running at this point in time, but it's an 8 out of 10. So we have a hard session on that Monday morning. Maybe Tuesday, you run at the same time, but it's a slightly easier run, so it's a 5 out of 10. Let's say Wednesday, we do another hard run, another 8 out of 10. But actually Wednesday is the day that, okay, maybe we've got a team sport or there's something in the evening. And so there's some training that happens here, right? And you find that quite hard, it's a 7 out of 10. Let's say Thursday, you want to get back into it though, and you have your hard run here. It's another 8 or a 9 out of 10. Friday, you have a rest day. And then Sunday, you have a bit of a lie-in, and we do our longer run here. Sunday might be another rest day. When you start to map your training, it then helps you understand how much carbohydrate you're going to need in certain meals. So I'm going to start doing little squares for meals across here as well. Another little tip I want to explain is that in the hour after exercise, your body is very receptive to carbohydrate. So you have more, you basically have a faster rate of muscle glycogen resynthesis. So you want to make use of that, because if you're able to put carbs back in that 60-minute, 45 to 60-minute window after, it tops you back up. That then helps with your energy levels. It brings cravings down through the rest of the day. So I'm going to put in here these little boxes, which are meals. So it makes sense to do that after all of your sessions, so that you're topping up and you're feeling good through the rest of the day. What I find is that often clients don't do this, because if they're training early, they're getting it in, getting it done. Maybe they haven't even eaten beforehand, not even anything small either. They're just getting it in, get it done. And then suddenly they're back and it's kids to school, or it's straight to work and it's meetings. And then it's maybe just grab a bit of toast and then it's lunch. If you do that, remember with your petrol tank, you've dipped in a huge amount of your petrol tank here. Because you're starting to get low there, and maybe if you're trying to be active through the day, you've got a job where you walk around a little bit, you're going to get to here and think, I need sugar. The donuts, the sweets are going to start looking really attractive, because from your body's perspective, you haven't given it what it needs. So it's giving you a bigger signal for carbohydrate. It's telling you, go get fast releasing carbohydrate just because I need it in me now. So if we're able to have a more aggressive refuel here, at a time when your body really needs it, I'm going to give 3 ticks for carbohydrate here. Let's put a little tick, so carbs. It puts carb back in when you need it, so then you feel good through here. Okay, we're going to go lunches, probably around that sort of 12-1 time. Let's say you have a fairly consistent lunchtime throughout the week. Maybe Saturday, if you've done a refuel here, it might be slightly later. Sunday lunch. Okay. I'm going to also put in breakfast at a similar time most days, so that your body starts to know when food is coming and you get into a good routine with your digestion. I'm going to put a little bit of something in here. Okay, I'll explain that in a second. And then probably having, well, that might have been our lie-in. Let's take that out. Let's give you a lie-in. Or in this example, someone has a lie-in, but we have something small in there. Sunday can also be a lie-in. There's breakfast and then there's dinner. If I also put in our third meal, okay. Well, I'm losing my grids. There we go. Now, how do we fuel and refuel our petrol tank? So we know we've dipped down here. If we've been pretty aggressive here, good. This will make you feel good through here. We want to, because this is an 8 out of 10, we want to have some carbohydrate, can continue that refuel, get us back up. This one might not need to be as big. Okay, we might have 1 or maybe just 2 ticks. So there's some carbohydrates that we're going into this session feeling good. Okay, we've dipped into that tank again, maybe not as much, but we want to go aggressive again, just so that we're feeling good through the morning. Next consideration after you do a session is, when am I next going to be depleting my petrol tank? So here to here, we've got 24 hours. What that means is we've got at least 3 meals, maybe some snacks if we need to put extra in. Here, we've got more than that because we've got a lot more than 24 hours. We've got 24 hours, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 6 feeding opportunities before we train again. So we can have some carb in here to make sure we're up nice and full, but then actually this one would be a meal where we don't need as much carbohydrate. This would be a meal where we restrict the amount of carb on the plate, especially if we're looking to moderate energy intake. This would be one that we would manipulate and bring the energy down, because it's not going to affect how you feel necessarily. It's not going to affect your training or the intensity. This one, similarly, we maybe don't need a big breakfast or have something different. We just have a 1 tick. Because we want to make sure if we're pretty topped up going into here, we're going to have some carbs again, some carbs, depending on our activity. Remember, it's not just training that depletes your tank. It's not just structured training. It might be that on this day, you're commuting into work, you're suddenly doing a lot more stairs, or you're going shopping, or so there's something where your heart rate elevating that's not necessarily exercise. If that's the case, we might need more carbs after that to top you back up so that you feel really good in this session. If you are someone who does an evening into a morning, we need to be really critical. And this is where I see a lot of people go wrong. If you are doing an evening session, it's late, you're knackered, maybe you come back and you prioritize protein. Yes, protein is good, and I'm going to explain protein, but if we're having this meal and maybe we get back at like 10 p.m, we just have a protein shake or a bit of yogurt and we go to bed, then you want to get up and train hard. What's happened to our petrol tank here? Well, if we did a good job through here, this might be half full because we've depleted a lot of it. If we haven't put the carbs in here, this is going to be terrible. It's going to be one of those sessions where you're like, what happened there? Why am I not feeling good? Because my petrol tank was half full. I've then got 20 minutes into the session and I've fallen apart. So this meal is absolutely fundamental. We need to have the green light for carbohydrate there. That needs to put something back in. And then I'd be inclined to have something small here as well. I would advise trying not to do this one fasted, because you just need another feeding opportunity. Now, if this is super early and it's like a 6 a.m. job, have something like a small handful of dried fruit, just to get like 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate in, because then you can have that 5 or 10 minutes before and you've got some circulating carbohydrates so that you feel good for this and your petrol tank doesn't deplete quite so much, so you can get most out of that session. Here again, we've got multiple feeding opportunities until our next session, but because we're likely to be very low with our petrol tank here, we're still going full recovery, full carbs there, probably double align again, just to make sure that we're feeling good, we've got energy for life. And then here we maybe back off a bit. Right? So then depending on exercise activity that's non-structured, we want to just make sure that we're topping up into this one so that we feel good. Hopefully that has started to elucidate maybe where you're going wrong a little bit. And you now know that, right, the importance of these refuels, the importance of putting carbohydrate back in when your body needs it, because what's going to happen when you start getting this right is your body is thinking, this is great. Like, I'm not having to give a really big signal for this person to eat carbs. So when you're getting to the 3 p.m. lull at work, if you've had some slow releasing carbohydrate in your lunch instead of just having that salad, here, when you're low normally at work because you haven't had carbs, suddenly the biscuits, if instead of being like, oh God, I'm just going to have those, you don't necessarily feel like that because you're being guided by your hormones. Like, people think that cravings are just like, oh, okay, I'm just someone who really likes chocolate or really has a sweet tooth. Like, people say that a lot. But actually, when you start getting this right, all of that changes and it's just a really natural thing. So this is the traffic light program, and I've done it with ticks and crosses pretty much because I don't have an amber pen. But if you have the green light for carbohydrate in here, these double ticks, these might be ambers. And then if you're looking to have lower carb meals, you might put that as a red. So you can then start to see which meals I need to have more carbs in and less carbs in. Now we've fixed your energy levels, I now want you to be able to bounce back from training. So we're going to have a quick word on protein. Oh, another graph. Stop boring us, James. A little bit of science before I make it practical. What people used to think with protein is that what is true, I suppose, is that when you feed with protein, so we feed with protein, we get a rise in muscle protein synthesis. So we eat protein here, we get a rise in muscle protein synthesis. Now, it used to be thought that that rise is transient, and after 0.4, maybe like 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight, so this is grams per kilogram of body weight, that wave would crest and it would come down. So after 1 to 3 hours, that wave of muscle protein synthesis will be up and down, which is why you would get bodybuilders, particularly bodybuilders very into their protein, you would have them having 6 meals over the day because they would want to be making use of this. They would want to be maximally stimulating muscle protein synthesis as many times as they can. So if they do 0.4 6 times a day, you've got maybe 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12, 3, 6, 9 p.m. You've gone right the way through and you've had 6 lots of that. You've got 2.4 grams per kilogram body weight. Now, there's some recent research that came out. It was in December 2023, so it's just over a year old now. But this has blown this theory out the water, which is very bizarre that that happens in the literature, but we need to embrace science and move with it. So this theory that muscle protein synthesis comes up and crests here based on you having 0.4 grams per kilogram body weight is no longer the case. So this is some research by, and again, get the name right, by Tremelin et al, and it was in 2023. And the paper, if you want to do your extra reading, is the anabolic response to protein ingestion during recovery from exercise has no upper limit in magnitude and duration in vivo in humans. A catchy name. But let me summarize the paper for you. What that paper says is that the more protein you have, that wave will keep going up. So it blows the protein timing out the water really. So if you've got your PT saying, okay, you need to make sure you've got 4, 5, or even 6 high protein feedings and don't go 2 or 3 hours without eating protein, it's not really the case. So what we want to do is focus on protein total. Protein total is the key thing. This number, 2.4 grams per kilogram body weight, is still right, this number, but the distribution of how you eat it is less important than we once thought. This number is high, very high protein. So let me detail protein. So we've got 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight. That is the recommended daily intake for sedentary people in the UK. Most people have far more than that. So the reason that hasn't been updated is because it's not really an issue. So that's still the government recommendation. I would say I would term that as low protein. We then have 1.2. So I would say this is low to moderate. Low, moderate would be 1.2 grams per kilogram body weight. 1.6, we start getting up. So this is moderate here. Moderate protein is up to 1.6, and then I would say high is 1.6 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight. So that's high. We then have 2 to 2.4, that number here is very high. If you are looking to just maintain body weight and you're not in a severe caloric deficit, we want to be sitting in this ballpark. I don't normally recommend clients do a severe energy deficit anyway, but if they do, there is research suggesting that having a bit more than this, so having up to 2.4 is beneficial. Now, if we're looking to eat in this range, let's say you are 100 kilograms, 1.6 is 160 grams of protein. Okay, 2, if you're 100 kilograms, the only reason I'm using 100, just the math's easy, 200 grams of protein. It's a very large amount of protein. So depending on your athlete's size, you need to really start looking at your protein total over the day and actually to get clarity on this. And this is where tracking can be helpful. So instead of using MyFitnessPal or your tracking device as a way of monitoring your calories and energy intake, it's a good way of just checking in on your habits and your protein habits and seeing where you sit in this range. Because to be honest, if you are consistently here, that's going to impact your performance, your recovery. However, if you're consistently around here, then you're probably doing fine. Unless you want to manipulate your body composition, lose a little bit of fat mass, so you're eating less energy, so a lower calorie diet to be able to do that, then you might benefit getting into here. So that's where tracking is then going to give you that insight. Do I need to change my habits around protein? To be able to get into this sort of range without tracking and just having a more positive relationship where you're not logging everything constantly, I recommend you use your hands. So when you're making a meal, maybe it's a lunch or an evening meal, the size of your palm, because obviously the size of your hands are going to change, the more weight, normally a bigger athlete, heavier, is going to have bigger hands. So the size of your palm, so this section here, about that as a good amount of protein from a high protein food. So meat, fish. If you're going to have a vegetarian protein source, you might need it ever so slightly bigger than that. But that should bring about 30, 40, up to 50 grams of protein in that meal, depending on the hand size. So if you're doing that in your 2 main meals, we start to get closer to this range. We then need the same amount of protein at breakfast. So breakfast foods, you're probably not having the same sort of meals as you would in lunch and dinner. But if you're trying to always include a high protein food in your main meals, so breakfast, that might be eggs. Eggs, I appreciate, take time. So if you're doing cereal, let's put some yogurt on that. We're trying to get an ample amount of protein coming in all of your main meals. If you can do that, so how I coach clients, if you can have an obvious high protein food in each of your main meals, you're likely to be getting into this range consistently. Now, I said that the timing is less important and that really we just need to focus on these numbers. There's one caveat here. So remember when we mapped out your training and then we have your recovery? If we're eating a meal, because we don't just eat macronutrients, we don't just eat carbohydrate, fat and protein, we eat food. So if we're eating a meal, especially if it's after a training exercise, then we need to have some protein in it. It's a good opportunity to have some high protein food as well as some high carbohydrate food. So starting the day with an ample protein, so I would say that sort of 0.3 to 0.4 grams per kilogram body weight fairly early into the day is going to be good. The reason for that is that with these muscle protein synthesis waves, because your last meal here at dinner is probably going to be one of the larger protein feedings, so you're going to have a wave, maybe it's 7, 8 p.m, muscle protein synthesis comes up, but you're essentially fasting while you're sleeping, so that wave's going to come up and then down. So you're now in a muscle breakdown state until you feed with protein in the morning. So if you train and you're not eating protein fairly soon, training is stressful on the body. We want to be getting out of this stressful state fairly soon so that our body is getting signals of not, oh, fuck, we're in this stress state. We don't want to be just going to hold on to calories when they come. We want to be able to adapt to the training. So we don't want to have any additional stress that we don't want. So breaking fast early with protein is helpful. So having some protein soon into the day and actually making sure that there's that obvious protein element in your breakfast is going to really help. It'll also help you achieve that high protein total that we're aiming for. Ending the day with some protein as well, going to be helpful because we're going into that overnight fast. So without wanting to simplify things too much, high protein in each of your main meals. Try and break fast with ample protein if you can. And regarding timing, having some protein soon after your exercise. so that we can get out of that muscle breakdown, catabolic state, and the stress state caused from exercise. Hopefully that has been helpful. And I'm going to rub this out, and then I'm going to tell you what we can do next. Whew, okay, that was a lot. We covered a lot there. We looked at how the intensity and duration of your sessions depletes your petrol tank, and how to fuel and refuel after those to ensure that you go into each training session with a good petrol tank and you have high energy levels. And then how to refuel after so that your energy levels are good through the rest of the day. We then discussed protein, and we looked at the protein numbers that allow you to recover optimally from all that hard work that you're putting in training. Now, the way I see it is that you now have 3 options. Okay, so the first option is you can be like, okay, thanks for that information, James, but that sounds like a ton of effort, and maybe I'm not doing quite so bad with my nutrition. I mean, I eat a lot more vegetables than some of my friends. And cool, great, well done on the vegetables. I'm happy for you. But at the same time, I'm quite concerned because I'm wondering how long you can persist with this and just continue to ignore a lot of red flags. But I don't think many people are going to choose that option. The second option is you can say, wow, that's awesome, James. Thanks for all those useful tips. I'm super pumped. I'm going to get started with this right now. I'm going to do all this on my own. And you can, and you should. But I've been there. You'll soon realize quite how much time and effort it's going to take to get it right and get it right consistently. I mean, we covered a lot there, but actually there's so much I had to leave out to keep this video digestible. For example, with the traffic light, we focused on which meals to have more or less carbohydrate in. And don't get me wrong, that's a great start, but it's still quite vague. It's quite good to know how much carbohydrate to have, and then also to have some practical examples using foods and meals that you like, so that you can stay consistent and be optimally fueling and refueling. We also just scraped the surface when it comes to protein. We didn't touch on protein quality or lifted the lid on supplements. So I hope I've done a half decent job of explaining some of the theory here, but realistically it's the application that is the key bit, because it's that's going to allow you to have the success and the results that you crave. How do you know what recipes to have, what pre-fuels, what refuels, what high protein snacks to build into your diet, into your routine, so that you can stay consistent, to be optimally fueling and refueling and recovering from all this hard work that you're doing? And how do you do all of that whilst also considering your long-term health and well-being, and not to mention your gut health? So with so many questions still to answer, you may risk getting confused and actually just coming back to the situation you're in now, which is feeling low energy, having that inconsistency, and feeling frustrated. And then there's the third option. You can ask for help. You can let me guide you for the first 10 weeks of your nutrition journey. Look, I have a sport and exercise science degree from Loughborough University. I then spent 2 years studying my postgraduate in sport nutrition with the International Olympic Committee. I then spent 6 years building a sport nutrition consultancy business, all the while investing in myself, literally spending thousands on CPD, continued professional development. So for example, I am a qualified motivational interviewer, and I use this style when coaching my clients, because it's what enables them to have long-term success when they didn't get that with other practitioners. So you have a decision to make. You've probably been experimenting with your nutrition for a while, learning, implementing different strategies, and you're just sick and tired of putting in all of that time and effort and energy without seeing the reward. Or maybe you've figured out some of this stuff already, but you just want to save a lot of time. Then what you need to do is message me on Instagram and let me help you start this sport nutrition journey. In fact, before we start any coaching, I have a process where you have a free discovery call. And that is so that we have an opportunity to have a chat and get to know each other and actually build our relationship. The reason I do this is because our relationship is going to be fundamental to your long-term success and implementation of these strategies. Look, I get it, I've been there. It's hard doing this on your own. And if you think I can help you with this, then just drop me a message on Instagram. There should be a link down there in the description. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.